Hello and welcome to the Commander's Quarters. I'm your host, Mitch. Glad to have you here. Here at the Commander's Quarters, we're all about Commander on a budget. Today's episode is going to be a $50 deck tech. When I say $50, I mean that is an overall deck cost. Both shipping and commanders that are $10 or less are going to be included in that cost, but basic lands will not be. Decks on this channel are built to be fun, inexpensive, and focused. If you want to learn more about what a focused commander deck is, check out this video here. On this deck tech, I'm going to take you through its strategy, the tactics, and how this deck wins. This show and episodes like this one are possible thanks to viewers like you. If you're looking for an easy way to help support this show, make sure that you like, share, and subscribe. Also, hit that bell notification icon so you don't miss any new episodes. And while you're at it, subscribe and review our podcast as well. You can also go check out our playmats and other merchandise at thecommandersquarters.com. Also, make sure you check out the Porcine Stand, our limited edition playmat on Kickstarter that's only available for the 30-day campaign. Another easy way to support this show is with our TCGplayer affiliate links. So whether you're buying a deck or individual cards, you can use this general link right here or one in the description. And the final way that you can support this show is by supporting us directly by becoming a patron. There are many benefits to being a patron, and I truly couldn't do this without all of their support. Today's commander is going to be Thantis the Warweaver. She's a 5/5 spider with vigilance and reach that costs 3 black, red, green. She has all creatures attack each combat if able, and whenever a creature attacks you or a planeswalker you control, put a +1/+1 counter on Thantis the Warweaver. Forcing everyone to attack can really throw off everyone's game. Many decks like to sit back and wait for the opportune moment to attack, and this deck doesn't allow that to happen. Now, if our opponents do decide to swing at us, Thantis is going to get bigger. And she also has vigilance and reach, so she's going to be back to block most things. But we also have other ways to incentivize our opponents to swing elsewhere. We're going to be running an incredible amount of fogs in this deck. So unless our opponents want to waste their attack and make Thantis bigger, they're going to have to swing elsewhere. Now we need to make sure that we can keep our hand full of fogs, so we're going to be running a lot of draw spells as well. So this type of deck is what is known as a turbo fog deck. Our strategy is going to be pretty simple. We're going to ramp, draw cards, and protect ourselves with fogs. Again, we're going to make sure that our opponents are incentivized to swing elsewhere when we force them to attack. And then how do we win with this deck? We're going to force our opponents to take each other out, and then we're going to finish off that last opponent. Again, if they can't swing at us, they're going to have to swing at each other, and they're going to end up taking each other out. Once we're down to one player, it's going to be easy to take them out, especially since we can continue to fog their attacks. As with all Commander's Quarters decks, I'm going to take you through 10 different tactics that show you how the deck works and how we're going to win with it. So let's start off with tactic number 1, spinning webs. First up, there's Wayfarer's Bauble, which we can pay 2 to tap and sacrifice to get a basic land into play tapped. Up next is Fauna Fertility, which is an enchantment that essentially does the exact same thing. And then Search for Tomorrow is another good turn 1 play since we can suspend it for a green. When we do cast it, it's going to get us 1 basic land into play tapped. And then Secure Tribe Elder is a fantastic addition to this deck. We can sacrifice it to get a basic land into play tapped. Up next, we've got some more good turn 2 plays with Farseek, Rampant Growth, and Edge of Autumn. Farseek's going to get us either a mountain or a swamp into play tapped. And then both Rampant Growth and Edge of Autumn will get us any basic land into play tapped. Then we're running Harrow, Cultivate, and Grow from the Ashes. Harrow makes us sacrifice 1 land in exchange for 2 basics into play untapped. Cultivate's going to get us 1 basic into our hand and 1 into play tapped. And then Grow from the Ashes gets us 1 basic into play untapped or 2 if we kicked it. Next up, we've got Explosive Vegetation and Circuitous Route, which are both going to get us 2 basics into play tapped. And finally, there's Wilderness Reclamation, which says at the beginning of your end step, untap all lands you control. So this lets us cast whatever we want on our turn while still having mana up for fogs. But outside of fogs, we've got some other ways to incentivize our opponents to attack each other. Let's go through those ways now in tactic number 2, the Spider's Lair. First up, there's Hissing Miasma and Blood Reckoning, which do the exact same thing for this deck. They're enchantments that say whenever a creature attacks you, its controller loses 1 life. Our commander is going to be forcing our opponent's creatures to attack. Now, players can still choose to attack us if they're willing to lose that life. But on top of losing life, they're going to be growing our commander, and then also their attack can just be fogged by us. Because of this, just having 1 of these enchantments out can really deter attacks. An especially effective enchantment in this deck is Marchese's Decree. It does the exact same thing. If a creature attacks us, its controller loses 1 life. But on top of that, when it comes into play, we become the Monarch. The Monarch gets to draw a card at their end step. And to take the Monarch from us, our opponents are going to have to hit us with combat damage. This can be extremely hard, especially when we keep getting fogs from this. Now, as effective as this is, I still think that the Golden Pig of this deck is slightly more effective. The Golden Pig is going to be our number 1 card out of our 99. And the Golden Pig for this deck is Revenge of Ravens. It's an enchantment for 3 and a black that says whenever a creature attacks you or a planeswalker you control, that creature's controller loses 1 life and you gain 1 life. This can really disincentivize any attacks on us. So first off, if someone chooses to attack us, our commander is going to grow. On top of that, they're going to be losing life and we're going to be gaining life from their attack. That's a 2 life point swing for each creature they attack us with. And again, with the number of fogs that we're running in this deck, we can pretty much blank their attack and make it useless. Once we only have 1 opponent left though, they're going to be forced to attack us. This card can be great early game, it can also be a fantastic finisher, and that's why it's the Golden Pig. Now, I mentioned that this deck is running an incredible amount of fogs, so let's go through them now. Let's move on to tactic number 3, a foggy day. It might be pretty obvious, but the first fog effect comes from, well, fog. It says prevent all combat damage that would be dealt this turn. Preventing combat damage can be a very impactful thing. With this, for just 1 mana, you're completely blanking someone's attack. Now, just one fog effect won't be enough to deter attacks, so we're going to be running plenty of more, including Spore Frog. Essentially, we can sacrifice Spore Frog to fog. We're also going to be running some slightly less efficient fogs with Commencement of Festivities, Defend the Hearth, and Root Snare. Mana to cast our fogs, though, shouldn't be very hard since we've got plenty of ramp for this deck. So we've also got some slightly different fogs with Druid's Deliverance and Deep Wood. Each of these can only save us from an attack. Now, most of the time, we're just going to be protecting ourselves anyways, but we can use our other fogs for political gain as well. If we can save a player from certain death, they're going to make a deal to do so. And finally, we've got Moon Mist, which is somewhat of a strange fog. It says, transform all humans, prevent all combat damage that we dealt this turn by creatures other than werewolves and wolves. There aren't a ton of wolves or werewolves decks out there, so this is going to be a fine fog most of the time. But we're not quite done with fogs just yet. So let's move on to tactic number 4, Extra Foggy. First up, there's Undergrowth, which can just be a standard fog or it can be something more. If we pay an extra 2 into red, it doesn't affect red creatures. So this allows our commander to still deal damage while blanking our opponent's non-red creatures. And then Terrifying Presence and Winds of Calcisma can also blank our opponent's creatures while allowing our commander to hit. Next up, we're running 2 fogs that cycle with Lull and Haze of Pollen. There might be times where we're overflooded with fogs and we need something else. Another fantastic fog in this deck is Moment's Peace. It has flashback for 2 and a green, so we can cast it a second time. And then there's Spore Cloud, which says, tap all blocking creatures, prevent all combat damage that we dealt this turn. Each attacking creature and each blocking creature doesn't untap or gets controller's next untap step. So essentially this fogs one opponent twice. Next up, there's Snag, which we can actually cast for free if we discard a forest instead of paying its cost. And finally, we've got 2 fogs that can gain us life with Respite and Blunt the Assault. Respite's going to gain us 1 life for each attacking creature, and Blunt the Assault gains us 1 life for each creature on the board. Like I mentioned before though, we need plenty of ways to draw cards to make sure that we have a handful of fogs. So now let's move on to tactic number 5, Finding Fogs. First up, there's Read the Bones, which is going to let us scry 2, then draw 2 cards, and we lose 2 life. Next up, we've got 3 ways to draw 3 cards and lose 3 life with Painful Truce, Ambition's Cost, and Ancient Craving. Next up, there's Necrology, which is kind of a strange card. We can only cast it during our end step, but it allows us to pay X life to draw X cards. And then there's Moonlight Bargain, which says, look at the top 5 cards of your library. For each card, put that card into your graveyard unless you pay 2 life, and put the rest in your hand. Then we're going to be running some cards that don't lose us any life with Harmonize and Siphon Mind. Harmonize is going to draw us 3 cards, and Siphon Mind draws us 3 cards most of the time and makes each of our opponents discard a card. Finally, perhaps the biggest way to draw a ton of cards at once is Return of the Wild Speaker. It says, choose 1, draw cards equal to the greatest power among non-human creatures you control, or non-human creatures you control get +3/+3 until end of turn. So at the very least, we're going to be drawing 5 cards with our commander in play, but again, our commander can get much bigger. Now these one-shot effects are great, but we've also got some ways to consistently draw cards. So let's move on to tactic number 6, Search Engines. First up, there's Rites of Flourishing, which lets everyone play an additional land and draw an extra card each turn. So this can really help us ramp on top of keeping our hand full of fogs. And then there's Deathreap Ritual, which says at the beginning of each end step, if a creature died this turn, you may draw a card. So this can draw us up to 4 cards on 1 turn cycle. Next up, we've got some repeatable card draw with Temple Bell and Otherworld Atlas. We can tap Temple Bell to make each player draw a card. And then we can tap Otherworld Atlas to put a charge counter on it, and then tap it to make each player draw a card for each charge counter that's on it. Finally, there's Abundance, which isn't technically card advantage, but it is card selection. It says if you would draw a card, you may instead choose land or non-land and reveal cards from the top of your library until you reveal a card of the chosen kind. You put that card into your hand and put all other cards revealed this way on the bottom of your library in any order. So essentially at a certain point when you have enough lands, you can essentially make it so that you're only drawing non-land cards. But outside of drawing cards, we've got other ways to make sure that we have fogs in our hand. Let's move on to tactic number 7, Return of the Fog. First up, there's Regrowth, which is going to return target card from our graveyard to our hand. Getting 1 card back for 2 mana is a great deal. Next up, we've got 2 ways to get 2 cards back for 4 mana with Once in Future and Seeds of Renewal. And then we've got some ways to get a ton of cards back at once with Wildest Dreams, Reap the Past, and Nostalgic Dreams. Wildest Dreams costs XX and a green, and it's going to return X cards from our graveyard to our hand, and then it exiles. Reap the Past is going to return X cards at random from our graveyard to our hand, and then it exiles. And Nostalgic Dreams lets us discard X cards to get X cards back. By keeping our hand full of fogs, it's going to be very hard for our opponents to justify attacking us. But let's go through some ways to deal with their stuff in tactic number 8, Get Out of Here. First up, there's Return to Nature, which is very flexible. It says choose 1, destroy target artifact, destroy target enchantment, or exile target card from a graveyard. Another flexible card for this deck is Golgari Charm, which says choose 1, all creatures get -1/-1 until end of turn, destroy target enchantment, or regenerate each creature you control. And finally, there's Beast Within, which can deal with pretty much anything. It says destroy target permanent, its controller gets a 3/3 beast. Now there are plenty of great cards in this deck, and sometimes we just need the perfect one. Let's go through some ways that we can get that perfect card in tactic number 9, Spinning Webs. First up, we've got Diabolic Tutor and Razakast Right, which can each tutor for 1 card. On top of that, Razakast Right can cycle in case we don't need it. Next up, there's Diabolic Revelation, which says search your library for up to X cards and put those cards into your hand, then shuffle your library. Again, we've got plenty of ways to ramp with this deck, so we can tutor for a ton of cards with this. And finally, we're even running Dimir Houseguard, which has Transmute for 1 black. By paying that Transmute cost and discarding Dimir Houseguard, we can search our library for any card with a converted mana cost of 4. That can be one of our Fogs, or it can be our Golden Pig, or it can even be the card from this next tactic. And our final tactic is going to be tactic number 10, Thantis Jr. The only card in this tactic is going to be Grand Melee. It's a very simple card that says all creatures attack each combat of Fable and all creatures block each combat of Fable. So basically it does what our commander does and then some, but it's also an enchantment so it's harder for our opponents to deal with. At times it can be more reliable so it can be a good thing to tutor up. This deck can be absolutely deadly against your opponents and it can be a lot of fun to play. But now that we've gone through the spells in this deck, let's go on to the mana base. First up, there's Command Tower, which can tap for any of our colors, and Exotic Orchard can tap for any of our colors most of the time. Up next, there's Evolving Wilds and Terramorphic Expanse, both of which we can tap to sacrifice to get a basic land into play tapped. Next up, we're running one of the Panoramas with Jund Panorama. And then we've got Warp Landscape, which we can pay 2 and tap and sacrifice to get a basic land into play tapped. Next up, we've got Mirror Landscape and Blighted Woodland, which can get us 2 lands into play when we sacrifice them. And then there's Savage Lands, which comes into play tapped and taps for any of our colors. Next up, we're running 3 Vivid lands with Vivid Grove, Vivid Marsh, and Vivid Crag. And finally, we're going to be running 24 basic lands. 16 of those are going to be a forest, 6 will be a swamp, and 2 will be a mountain. And now that we've gone through every single card in this deck, let's do a quick price check. A quick reminder that our deck costs are calculated using TCGplayer optimization, optimizing with even heavily played and damaged cards because those cards need a home too. The average Thantis EDH rec deck will set you back $168.64. Our deck is going to be much more affordable, coming in at $49.94. Again, the price of this deck is the price that I got for it on the day that I'm recording. If you want to see a breakdown of this deck's cost, check out the link in the description. Keep in mind that prices can and will fluctuate and change over time. But with these deck costs, I want to be as transparent as I possibly can. Again, Commander's Quarters decks are about to be tuned and focused within their budget, but there are always ways that we can improve on them. So let's go through some reasonable upgrades now to see what some of those ways just might be. First up, let's add in Constant Mist by taking out Moon Mist. Next up, let's add in Tangle by taking out Deep Wood. And then we're adding in Arachnogenesis by taking out Defend the Hearth. Next up, let's add in Darkness by taking out Druid's Deliverance. And then we're adding in Sudden Spoiling by taking out Commencement of Festivities. Finally, let's add in Rite of the Raging Storm by taking out Root Snare. And now it's my turn to hear from you. So in the comments below, let me know what you think about this deck and what you think about the commander in general. Also, make sure you check out the Porcine Stand, our limited edition playmat that's only available for the 30-day Kickstarter campaign. Once that campaign ends, it will no longer be available for purchase, so make sure you're backing the campaign before it's too late. And make sure you're following us on social media for more updates and sneak peeks on future episodes. Again, a huge thank you to my patrons who help make this show possible. I truly couldn't do any of this without your support. If you want to support this channel directly, consider becoming a patron. There are many benefits to being a patron, including being able to vote on future commanders for deck tags. There are even tiers where you get your own personalized deck tag dedicated to you. You can check out all the Patreon tiers and rewards at patreon.com/commandersquarters. If you haven't already, make sure that you like and subscribe to the channel. Here at the Commander's Quarters, we're all about budget commander. So while you're at it, go ahead and check out some of our other types of episodes. And with that, I'm out of here. Thanks again and have a good one.